Good evening, good afternoon, everyone. I am Jim Hake, the founder and chief executive officer of Spirit of America. And I want to very happy to be speaking to you from Ukraine this evening. It's after curfew here, and we'll try to keep our voices down. So one thing that if you remember anything about what we say tonight, I'd like you to remember that if you want to save lives, support the soldiers and civilian volunteers in Ukraine, and help Ukraine win, please join with us at Spirit of America to do exactly those things. So I'll give you a little background on Spirit of America, what we're doing in Ukraine right now. Colleen Denny, our European Regional Director, will get into a good bit of detail about that with you. And we'll have a good chunk of time, we hope, for questions and answers. We'll stop at the half hour on the nose. So we'll try to go pretty quickly here. Spirit America is a privately funded nonprofit organization. And I founded the organization after the attacks of 9/11. Very simply, I wanted to stand up for what we stand for. And I wanted to give other citizens like me an opportunity to do something meaningful to help preserve the promise of a free and better life. And in Ukraine right now, it's pretty clear that the promise of a free and better life is a great risk. Ukrainians are fighting for their lives, they're fighting for their freedom, they're fighting for their democracy. And you've all heard about and witnessed through images and television and so forth, the horrible atrocities that are taking place. So Spirit America, we work all over the world alongside US troops and diplomats, military and State Department personnel, and provide private assistance to meet needs they identify, needs of local populations and local partner forces. We've done this in 95 countries over the years, and we've been providing assistance in Ukraine since 2015. So we have a 7-year track record in Ukraine and a network of people that we know, a trusted network of people that we know that is extremely important right now in terms of our ability to provide very targeted assistance exactly where the assistance needs to go. We don't just do things with partner forces like we were talking about tonight in support of Ukrainian soldiers and civilian volunteers. We provided humanitarian assistance to 40,000 Afghan evacuees during the evacuation crisis last year. We've set up livestock health programs in West Africa and provided veterinary scholarships for tribal youth. Everything we do is very tailored to what needs to be done in a particular place and time. One of our advisory board members, General Jim Mattis, has said that Spirit America's core capability is figuring out what needs to be done and doing it fast. I know that's an unusual way to describe an organization, but it's a great way to describe Spirit of America. So in this case in Ukraine, one of the challenging things for us was to provide very targeted, decentralized assistance at the point of need, but to do so on a much larger scale than we've ever done it before. And one of the key things in the first week or two of after the war was to put in place a scalable procurement and logistics infrastructure that was a great complement to our relationship with the US military that's been able to get assistance to the point of need in Ukraine in, I'll say, faster than FedEx could get it from New York to Los Angeles. Colleen will be talking more about that. So what we're doing, as I mentioned earlier, is we are supporting the Ukrainian soldiers and civilian volunteers, people like me and others on this call today who have chosen to step up to defend their country, protect their families, and defend their country. So the reason we're doing that is that stopping the source of suffering is the most humanitarian thing we can do. And stopping the Russians in Ukraine, helping Ukraine win, is the most humanitarian thing that can be done at this point in time. The humanitarian crisis that you're witnessing, it has a ripple effect across the world. Wheat prices in Cairo because of the disruption of agriculture in Ukraine are creating civil unrest in Egypt. So, and that's just one of the very small parts of it, but the ripple effects of what's happening in this Russian launched war are tremendous. So our focus is to help the Ukrainians who are choosing to step up and defend their country, to help them be safer and more successful. We're providing protective aid. What's the category is called non-lethal assistance. We're providing things like body armor, also known as bulletproof vests, helmets, first aid kits, communications gear, and much more. But it's all to help be protective of the Ukrainian soldiers and civilian volunteers who are stepping up to defend their country. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Colleen. She's going to walk you through what we've done from the beginning, hit some of the wave tops there, and then we'll open it up for questions and answers. Well, open up for questions and hopefully you will provide the answers. So Colleen is, I mentioned, is our European Regional Director. She has a tremendous background. We have a team of all-stars, not just on our operations team, but Colleen is one of those all-stars. And you know, I've been told by partner forces, you know, U.S. military personnel, Colleen just has this great smile, but she's a real badass. And I'll tell you that she is. So Colleen joined us after she got her master's degree at Johns Hopkins School of Advanced International Studies. Before that, she was a captain in the United States Coast Guard. She captained a fast response cutter and was the harbor earthquake there a number of years ago. So Colleen has a great background in service, and she's serving again here with Spirit of America. Colleen, over to you.
Thank you, Jim, and good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining. I hope our connectivity is strong enough for this Zoom call. So just to give a overall timeline of how Spirit of America got here and what we're doing, like Jim described. So on February 25th, the day after the Russian launched invasion, the U.S. military team that had previously been located in Ukraine but had to evacuate, they called me and said, you know, this is what's happening, and we really need to do something. We need Spirit of America. So on March 1st, I landed in the region, and we immediately got to working with U.S. mil teams, working with their Ukrainian military counterparts, and with our Ukrainian network to start compiling and gathering all of the needs that Ukrainian military and Ukrainian volunteers were assembling in Ukraine. As you can imagine, this list is bottomless. Over 100,000 Ukrainians have volunteered and joined the newly formed territorial defense. And so therefore, they are starting with no gear and with no equipment. So working with our military partners, we have worked to deconflict all of the needs coming to us, to prioritize the needs, and then also prioritize where and at what unit the aid goes to. So on March 18th, our first plane landed. That was over 30 tons of aid. So that's over 60,000 pounds of aid. And as soon as the next day, we had some of that aid in Ukraine and with the immediate end user. And then by 31 March, all of that aid was at the final mile user. Plane lands on March 18th, and final piece of the aid gets to the end user by 31 March. Really fast turnaround, and those the gap in between when the plane landed and when the aid got into the hands of the Ukrainians is really not due to any logistical delays or any issues of us sitting on gear. It's simply because of the schedules and the what our Ukrainian partners are having to deal with on the other side. So many of them were not able to pull away from operations and to come meet us with the aid until later in the month. Our second plane arrived on March 30th, and within 24 hours, 1/3 of that plane load was already in Ukraine and was in the hands of the end users. And again, another plane of over 30 tons of aid. And this consisted primarily of helmets, bulletproof vests, individual first aid kits. So this is gear that the Ukrainians who are fighting really need. It's non-lethal gear, but it's critical for those who are fighting on the front lines. And one thing to note here is that some of this aid was sent immediately across to the Donbas. So 2 weeks ago, the main fight was in Kyiv. Now it's gearing up to be in Eastern Ukraine and the Donbas. So Terrell and I, our director of field operations, we did a direct handoff in Ukraine of this aid to Ukrainian military and to some of our Ukrainian partners. And the commercial truck that brought the aid in, we immediately downloaded it. The gear was reloaded onto Ukrainian military trucks, and it took off for the Donbas immediately, and was the bulletproof vests were on the chests of the men and women fighting in the front lines in the Donbas the next day. So truly our network is established enough both for supply and logistics, but also we also have the intelligence through our local networks of rerouting and getting aid exactly where it needs to go for those who are in the hottest conflict zones and who need it based on the real-time operations and how the battle space is continuously shifting. So I'll pause there and hand it back over to you, Jim, and we can keep talking about what we're doing here.
Well, I will toss a couple of questions that have come in your way in just a second, Colleen, but could you talk a bit more and give the scenario of Ruslan and the training center? And for everybody that's here with us tonight, if you haven't seen the New York Times story on Spirit America's assistance in Ukraine, it's an excellent one. And it features one of our key Ukrainian partners whose name is Ruslan. And we have a relationship with Ruslan going back to 2015 after the initial Russian invasion of Ukraine. I think it's important to remember that this is really a terrible extension of that initial invasion. But Colleen will tell you a little bit about what we're doing to help Ruslan and the training center they set up. But I'll give you an idea of, this is just one of the Ukrainians which we're helping. And again, we met Ruslan in 2015. He was a civilian advisor to the Ukrainian chief of defense, a four-star general. And prior to the Russian invasion and the war that was launched in the eastern part of the country, Ruslan was an up-and-coming executive at Kraft Foods, just a business guy, an exceptional one, but a business person, like so many of us on the call here today. And he chose to put that career on hold and to serve his nation. He did it. We supported projects of his in 2015, Ukraine's first armed forces radio station. And after when we were speaking with him, we kept in touch over the years. We were speaking with him before this new war was launched, and then after the war was launched. And I had sent him an email saying, Ruslan, how are you doing? How can we help you? And I asked how we could help because I meant it in terms of, is there anything we can do to help your family? And he sent a list of what he needed for a training center. And Colleen will get into this with you, a list of what he needed, about an arm long. And all that assistance has been delivered. But Colleen, tell a little bit about Ruslan, the training center, and what we've done there, please.
Sure. So the newly formed territorial defense has over 100,000 Ukrainian volunteers, but these are civilians who have no military training, have no background in anything operational. It's people who had IT jobs, accountants, truck drivers, you name it, the whole scope of Ukrainian society. So Ruslan has established a training center that has a 3-day curriculum. The curriculum covers first aid, battle movements, communications, command and control, and is really a 3-day crash course on training and getting people prepared for what they will face when they get sent to the front lines. So he formed this within a week of the war starting. And as of yesterday, over 360 new recruits had graduated from it. And all 360 of those, once they graduated, were sent to Kyiv and other frontline areas. So we have been supporting the training center through aid and also through connecting him to certain people who can help with developing the curriculum and with professionalizing and scaling this model. It has been so successful that the wait is 1 month long for trainees to get into the school and get the 3 days of training. So because of the need is so great, he has a second and third schools being replicated in other parts of Ukraine, and the syllabus is being shared, the curriculum is being shared, and the students get their 3 days and then are immediately sent to the front lines. So the what we're looking at is how do we really help this scale, and how do we go from 30 maximum trainees per class to 100 per class, and all that it takes on the back end in order to support this effort. So if you can imagine your child or your uncle has no experience and joins the territorial defense, how significant 3 days could really be when it comes to battlefield trauma, how to treat battle wounds, how to communicate properly, how to move properly, really significant despite only being 3 days. So this is an initiative that like Jim said, citizens, average Ukrainian citizens, using everything they have to join the fight and to really beat Russia. And like Jim said, everything we're supporting and everything we're doing here in Ukraine is through the lens of, will this help Ukraine beat Russia? Because if it's not, then what are we doing? So that's really the focus that we're taking on, and helping the Ukrainians beat Russia, regain their country, regain their sovereignty and their democratic values. And what greater cause can we join in than that?
Thanks, Colleen. And for those civilian volunteers who were stepping up to defend their country and defend their homes and their families, who are getting 3 days of training, you can imagine what it means to them to have body armor that is designed to protect them from the shots that are being fired, the rounds specifically that are being fired by Russian troops at them. So here's a question, Colleen. Are Russian forces subverting our efforts in Ukraine?
No, short answer is no. We have a trusted network, and also remember that while none of us, while on the Spirit of America team, we no longer have our security clearances from our active duty days, we're working with US military and their partners, and they share what they can with us. What they can't share, they keep to themselves, but make sure that everything we're doing and the partners that we're working with and the routes that we're running are secure. And so this partnership with the US military is really unique and really allows us to be agile, to be in the right spots at the right time, and also to make sure that we're keeping our partners safe in Ukraine and outside.
And another question is, what does a $1,000 donation translate to in terms of protective gear, first aid kits, and so on? So I'll take that one. So what's called an individual first aid kit. And these are military grade first aid kits, not the kind we buy at CVS. They cost $142, including the ballistic pouch that all the stuff goes in. An individual first aid kit has about 25 different elements, all of which are common. It's the same kind of first aid kits that US soldiers get. So that's $142. A ballistic helmet is $385. The total of body armor, a ballistic helmet, and an individual first aid kit is $1,281. Our person who joined us didn't ask this, but to charter a plane is $600,000. We have our third plane, which will be leaving in about 2 weeks. And what folks on the call tonight can help with, and in spreading the word, we purchased enough to fill about 2/3 of that plane. So anyone could help us fill that plane, and or fill the one after that. And those are the kind of things we're putting in there. Let's see. What items do the Ukrainian armed forces urgently need? Colleen, will you take that one, please?
Sure. So immediate needs have been bulletproof vests, the helmets, individual first aid kits, like Jim said. We're also trying to think of how we can better equip people, and communications gear is a significant part of any battle, but in particular here in Ukraine. So when talking about costs, a UHF, an ultra high frequency radio that an individual can carry and speak securely on, costs about $1,000. So the full kit of a Ukrainian volunteer or soldier from head to toe is several $1,000s, so that they can move efficiently, communicate efficiently, medicate efficiently, and do all the battlefield tactics that are required.
Question is, the New York Times wrote that we've delivered medical, non-lethal aid, protective aid, totaling 7.2 million already. Is that true, and how do you finance that? Well, it is true. We have raised $15 million thus far. Privately, we're entirely privately funded. We don't receive, and we wouldn't accept government funding, which is one of the reasons we're able to move so quickly in the things that we do. So those are all private donations ranging from $10 to $6 million is our largest individual gift, and many, many points in between. Our goal is to raise $100 million to scale even further what we're doing with all the kinds of material assistance that we're talking about here. And of the 15 million that we've raised, 14 and a half of that has been spent or is in purchases in progress. A good portion of the difference between that 14 and a half and 7.5 is will be on plane number 3. Let's see, looking at our questions here. Colleen, are you supplying equipment to foreign volunteer battalions in Ukraine?
No, we have not. Every piece of aid that we've gotten across and into the hands of Ukraine has been Ukrainian Hands. That's based on the assessments from our U.S. military, from the Ukrainian military, as well as other networks, that it is those that need it most urgently, and that they're in the locations where that aid is needed.
Is there any sense of an end of the conflict from our perspective on the ground? So I'll take a quick crack at that and then give it over to you, Colleen. So one of the things that is most impressive and is another reason why we as Americans should do all we can to support the Ukrainians. The principal reason why things have gone so well in Ukraine in this Russian-launched war is because of the regular citizens who have stepped up to defend their country and stand up for their freedom. And it's really awe-inspiring that people have done that. And it's what you see when you have a free society. So people, came out of the woodwork to help their own country. And so what we're looking at Spirit America is, well, how do we help those people? They do not need to be convinced to fight for their freedom and defend their country. They are doing it. They just need our help. And in terms of the end of the conflict, what Ukrainians want to do, they want to win. They don't want to have a frozen conflict, which is exactly what happened in 2014 and 2015. Since 2015, around 16,000, before this war started, around 16,000 Ukrainians were killed by Russians and Russian-backed fighters since that effort back then. And they need our help. And there are two things that, when the American people come to help, two things happen. One is the direct impact of the assistance that's provided. The body armor, helmets, first aid kits have a tangible direct impact on people staying alive. The other thing is the boost to morale that not just other governments, but other people care and are willing to care and actually do something about it. So, people have said, gee, I wonder what I would have done in World War II, or what I would have done during the Civil Rights Movement, or any moments, transformative moments in American history. And I would say, well, you're doing it now. If you're watching and saying, gee, that's a really tough thing, but not doing anything, well, please lean forward. The Ukrainians need that help. And what they understand is that help, the civilian to civilian, the citizen to citizen help, is going to be what makes a difference here. And that's why we're here now and why we're talking to you all. Anyway, Colleen, what's the outlook for the end of the conflict?
Right. No, I think you grabbed the atmospherics of how the Ukrainians are feeling here really accurately, Jim. I liken it to after the September 11th attacks in the United States, how there was national unity, and every house, every building, every business was flying the American flag, and there was a tangible sense of unity and solidarity in the United States. It's like that times 1 million here right now. You no longer say hello, you say Slava Ukraini, glory to Ukraine, and the person responds with Heroam Slava, glory to the heroes. So this is a nation that will not be have their democratic values and their freedom taken away by an unjust war, by a authoritarian dictator who is refusing to recognize their existence. So while there is morale and there is courage and there is strength here, the momentum needs to be maintained. It needs to be continued, and that comes not only by the foreign governments that are bringing in big aid of various forms, but it also comes from civil society, and like Jim said, from average Americans who are telling the average Ukrainian who is now defending their country that I care, I'm here with you, and I stand with you.
Yeah. Well, we're just about up on time. So Colleen, any closing thoughts?
No, thank you to all of our supporters. This isn't possible without you. It truly means so much to be putting these vests on the chests of these Ukrainians, and the more aid that we're planning to get here. And also, significant in that our aid alongside with the U.S. military is keeping morale within the Ukrainian forces, and also reestablishing and reinforcing the relationships that the U.S. military has with their Ukrainian partners, because U.S. military is obviously not in Ukraine right now, but through us, they are showing their support, and that's a really significant part of this here as well when we think about morale and the health of the Ukrainian forces.
Thanks. And just a couple of thoughts. One is, please reach out to your friends, get them to help us fill that next plane and the one after that. It will save lives directly. It will help those who are on the front lines in Ukraine, the civilians and the regular armed forces, and it's going to help free people defend their freedom. Those are all really good things. And if seeing the atrocities, the mass graves, Ruslan, who we mentioned earlier, shared photos with us. His house in Kyiv was destroyed. There was a mass grave next to the house that his children lived in. Really tough to see. If those atrocities, just from a human standpoint, don't get you fired up to do something, I'll give you something else. My dad served in World War II. He no medals, just did his part. Americans across the country, both in joining the forces, civilians with victory gardens and scrap metal and working in factories, they did their part. And that's why we're always going to remember them as the greatest generation, because they did their part. We need to do our part now too. And maybe at this moment, we can be great too. Thank you very much for joining us. And we hope to have another update in about 3-4 weeks or so. And have a great rest of your day. Thank you.